Okay. You can hear me all right. We've got one presentation now, which is like an introduction, and then 3 presentations directly on the principles of creation, which we'll cover today. I realize we've got a very, very varied audience, and you've come here by many different routes. Also, because of the translation situation, it makes it more demanding. But one thing I feel very, very confident about is that when you choose to give such a substantial portion of time to study deeply and to try to find something precious and meet God more deeply, think about life and its meaning, then I'm very, very confident God will come and you will get some special insight, some special things. Probably, this is my way of thinking about it, God's been always waiting to try to speak to us, but he doesn't always get a chance because life is so full, so busy, and we're so much in a sort of a pattern sometimes, and then it's difficult to make the space so that actually we can have that particular mind and attitude which allows God to say something and maybe he wanted to say for a long time, couldn't express. So I am very confident such a thing will happen. I'm trying to adapt the presentations a little bit this particular week because our founder, Father Moon's very determined that we should share further insights beyond the book that David showed you this morning, the exposition of the divine principle. He's been sharing a lot more insights over the past 40 plus years since that book came out. So he's asked if possible we can include some of that content as well. He's actually referring to that as the original divine principle. It's the sort of a gathering together of the exposition of the divine principle and many other insights that he's shared through speeches and other books. So I'm going to try and include some small parts of that as well, but that's going to be a challenge to keep in the time scale. So we'll see how we manage that. And but the purpose is, of course, to share very deeply about Father Moon's own insight, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on. What he expressed recently, those of you who've known his emphasis, for example, his recent tour here in Europe, he's very much wanting to see the world turn in a good direction. And his understanding is people who are spiritually inspired have a role to play towards those who are maybe not so spiritually inspired, and to unite and work together. So he's always talking about this concept of those who have a close connection with God, and he calls that the able side, and we'll look at that a little bit more later on. And then the Cain side, those who are more distant. But how to connect the two together, centered on God, and lift everything up. So, for example, he's talked a lot in recent years about the able United Nations. He's talked about people of spiritual belief and inspiration and righteousness who can make a voice within the United Nations and lift up the whole level of the United Nations to combine with those of great political and economic and social skills and really bring the world into a new era. And he's saying this able UN should be founded on the original divine principle. In other words, he wants to share his insights or offer his insights to draw together people of all different faith and spiritual backgrounds and share some common understandings and be able to work together to lift up humanity. So I'm going to try and include some of that content from those lectures. So this is a little bit from those presentations. So maybe this is an interesting thing to think about. Why to study the divine principle together over the course of these days? Why should we be doing that? What's our goal? What's our objective in doing that? Well, really what this is expressing is we want to solve realistic problems. And where's the core of the difficulties, in a sense? It resides in the human heart. We're going to examine that. So also it's to do with healing healing the human heart. And when the human heart is in difficulty, then of course that's connected, we would say, to the difficulty in not being able to understand who I am and feel the love of God, if you like. And then that manifests itself then from individual trouble to many other different levels of trouble. So here are some of the issues or crises that we're facing as a society today. We can make, of course, a much longer list than that. But if we really want to solve it all, and we'll talk about this later also, we need to make a lot of revolutions in our world. But the most important revolution is, in a sense, the personal revolution. It's how I can transform myself. Because it'd be very difficult to imagine policies making a better world if we don't have better people. Because even you can have good policies and good laws, but if you don't have good people, they'll find their way around the policies and the laws to turn them into something different. So, in a sense, what we're going to be looking at, what we're going to offer as a very important way to address solving my own circumstance and putting my own heart to rights, and on that foundation and beginning to address the realistic problems of the world, is first and foremost to know God. Why know God? Because the point of sorry, just get rid of those interferences. The point is of the principle is that we are not self-creating. We were created. We are created by God. We come from God. God is our origin. So in order to really understand ourselves, we would need to know God. By knowing God, we can get to know who we are and what our identity is and what our purpose is. So we can know ourselves better. And then also connecting to this is developing a stronger relationship with God. And this has also to do, and we'll talk about this more later, getting myself really together and really focused and really clear in my life and what I'm doing with it, so that we're people of integrity, we're people who live what we believe in. This is to do with we'll talk about the unity of mind and body. And then these things then connect beyond myself into my wider relationships, centering on the family. So a lot of the most profound problems that lie behind a lot of the other social problems are to do with the crisis within the individual, which then expresses itself in the crisis in the family. So if we can sort out the crisis in the individual, we can do a lot to resolve things in the family, and that becomes a base to deal with a lot of social difficulties. And what would be the key to all of that? Well, this relationship with God, which permits me to see things from God's point of view. So in a sense, what's emerging out of this is a view of life, an ideology, and a value system that's associated with that view of life. And of course, to bring humanity together to create a peaceful future for humanity, we would need to share some fundamental understandings in common, beyond the difference of culture, beyond the difference of religion. So it's for those sorts of reasons that we're also gathering here together. So this should be helpful for my personal revolution. And then on that foundation, I should be able to be changing what's going on around me. So the expectation would be, after this time spent together, we go back to our families, and then something is altered in myself. And we're refreshed and renewed and revived. And we see our responsibility freshly again, closer to God. And then within our family, within our community, we're able to play a stronger role. So, of course, there are a number of you here who have had a long-term association with the Universal Peace Federation and our ambassadors for peace. So obviously, Father Moon has no, what can I say, authority over you. He's not paying you. You don't belong to his political party. He doesn't have one. So he doesn't have that sort of authority over you. But his concept is that he would touch your hearts. And because ambassadors for peace are very righteous, good people who are living for the sake of others, he would find a way to bind together and be able to really do something to serve humanity. Some of you are here have been long-term religious followers of Father and Mother Moon. And as you probably are aware, I think you're very keenly aware of this, he's always expressing that everybody has a messianic role. In other words, everybody has a role to love the society around them and have be a force for healing. So he's calling all of his long-term religious followers, he's saying, please be a tribal Messiah. Please exert an influence of love and service to the people that surround you. So again, the hope would be that being on this seminar would empower you in that way. Okay. So again, this is from these particular presentations. Father Moon gave a very big responsibility to one of his early Korean followers, Reverend Yu, to share some of his insights, to put his insights together, to put Father Moon's insights together, that are additional elements that can be added to the divine principle, the exposition of the divine principle, and this is drawn from that as well. So he's expressing, why is it so difficult to resolve the problems that we're facing as a world? Well, not surprisingly, after the first slide, it's because actually many times we're either denying God or ignorant of God. That's to say, we don't really know where we come from or why we exist. We don't understand the nature of God. We don't understand the nature that we should have in order to resemble God. And that's a big problem. That's a very fundamental problem. Because without a proper view and without a proper set of values, it's very difficult to put the world to rights. Even if we do have a concept of God, it may be difficult sometimes to take that concept or belief into our efforts to solve the problems. So even if we do believe, then how do we take that belief and employ it and use it as our means of insight and as our guide to actually dealing with the problems? And also another point you mentioned, I think this is an interesting and important point, and very important for religious people to remember, and that is we have got problems. We are not always true and pure and loving. We have a contradiction within ourselves, and we have to recognize that. I was just talking to Lotfi, is it Lotfi, who's here from Libya? You there, Lotfi? Oh, you're right in the front, right? And we were talking about people who've been in power in government for many, many, many years, 40 plus years or 30 plus years or 20 plus years. When you've been in a position of authority for a long time, it's very difficult to keep right. It's very easy to go off and end up doing things which are not really for the benefit of everybody, even though originally you intended to take care of everybody, do something good for your country. You can often end up doing something that's very selfish and wrong and thoughtless of others and very just for a small group of people, not for everybody. So that's because actually, although we share ideals and we want to make a better world, we have problems. And these problems tend to invade the good we're doing. I don't know if you also experience this. Probably got a few husbands here. Husbands, hands up, husbands. Any husbands here? We've maybe got a few wives here. I can't put my hand up for wives. But, it's very demanding being a husband or wife, or maybe a father or a mother, right? Everyone asks you to put your hands up for that. And we probably have a very, very, commitment to those roles. But there are times and moments where we find we fell short of, we're not as good as, we're not behaving as well as, we intended originally. And sometimes very tragically, for example, in the marital relationships, people who started off really wanting to love each other and make everything very wonderful together, they end up really impossible to relate to one another and being very bitterly divided from one another. Those sorts of things happen, right? But no one has the big marriage day expecting that to happen. But it does. What's that to do with? It's to do with this type of thing. So we have to recognize that there's contradictions within myself. So that's another reason we can't solve our problems, actually. Or the problems creep up on us and take over everything. So, everybody would like to have freedom, equality, peace, happiness. But, how can we make such a world? Well, that's very simple. What we do is we make sure the United Nations is a really good organization on the world level, and that solves all the world problems, and then that makes it better in the family, and that creates better people. That's the answer, right? Well, that could help a lot, it's true. But more fundamentally, the principal's viewpoint is that the starting point of all the solutions is with myself. I make myself a better person. That makes my family a better family. That makes, of course, it doesn't jump straight from family to world, right? There's a lot of things in between. But this is more fundamentally the point of view of religious people, actually. And I think it's a very valid point of view, right? That's not to say, of course, that we don't need to do anything at the world level or the national level. Of course we do, but we're saying this is more fundamental. So the peaceful world starts from me. So, hey, that's good, isn't it? Because it means we can do something about it. We can contribute. We can make a difference. Very, very important. And where do we make a difference? Well, we'll talk later about 3 key areas to make a difference. The first is how I remain true to my best thoughts and my godly nature by making sure that sort of mind directs my body. The next one is how I can be a true person to build a true family with my husband or my wife. And the next one is how we can be true people and relate to the world, to the natural world, to the environment in a true way. So we're going to talk about those. Okay, so this is a direct quotation from the introduction to the Exposition of the Divine Principle, that book. I've abbreviated a little bit, but it says here, everyone is struggling to attain happiness and to avoid misfortune. How then does happiness arise? How do we get to be happy? People feel joy when their desires are fulfilled. So when our desires are fulfilled, then we get happy, right? But think about that a little bit. There's a lot of people fulfilling their desires in this world, but doing something not very good. Because they have a type of desire which they're trying to fulfill, which is not a true desire. In other words, it hurts other people, and in the end it even hurts themselves. So there are 2 sets of desires, so it then talks about that. The word desire, however, is often not understood in its original sense, because in the present circumstances, our desires tend to pursue evil rather than good. Desires which result in injustice do not come from a person's original mind. So it's saying in there that we have 2 different types of desire. So we're going to explore this a little bit later on. We have some desires which are, it's saying original. It means the sort of desires through which we resemble the nature within us that resembles the nature of God. And we have another set of desires which are going to make a lot of problems if we pursue them. So when we pursue those desires that are going to make a lot of problems, in the moment we may feel a short-term little bit of happiness, but in the end we deeply regret what we did, and we look back on it and we realize we made a big mess. And sometimes you realize that not just on the individual level, you realize that on the historical level. You think about the history of nations or the history of religions and how much we can look back at what we did, and we thought we were doing something good, but now looking back at it, we realize we did something very, very bad as a religion, as a nation. Those sorts of things. So I just want to give an example, which is, I hope is a sort of striking example. This is an example of a person who I would say is following her true desires. But by following her true desires, she's doing things which most people wouldn't do. Because when you first think of them, it looks like it might make you very unhappy. Okay? Now, there are many such examples, but I'm going to pick on an individual, but not be, there are many people one could pick on. And one can even think about this in your own life, which would be extremely instructive. So this is a lady who's in the news quite a lot in these past few years. And as you probably know, she's in Myanmar or Burma. And her name's Aung San Suu Kyi. But I just picked this out as a sort of example. Everybody admires her. She's got a lot of international prizes. In 1991, she won the Nobel